The story of Robin Hood has been told for generations going back almost 1,000 years. As children, our first exposure to Robin Hood is because of this lovable fox here. Errol Flynn, Sean Connery, Kevin Costner, and Russell Crowe are only a few of the actors who have played this legendary character. His story is always seen as an altruistic hero, stealing from the rich and giving to the poor. But is this the true story? The real story of Robin Hood on this episode of Setting the Record Straight. The origins of Robin Hood date back to medieval England. The earliest surviving accounts of Robin Hood are from the mid-15th century ballad, Robin Hood and the Monk. In this tale, Robin and his vassal, Little John, are on their way to church. After a disagreement between the two, Little John abandons Robin. After this, at church, Robin is recognized and arrested for his thievery. Little John and Mooch the miller's son break Robin out of jail, embarrassing an unnamed king and sheriff. This medieval version of Robin Hood may vary slightly in the story, but the basic premise and characters that we find today are still there. For today's examination, we will focus on the modern incarnation of Robin Hood, developed by Sir Walter Scott in Ivanhoe, published in 1820. Ivanhoe is the quintessential medieval story of lords, knights, and chivalry. The protagonist is Wilfred of Ivanhoe, a veteran of the Third Crusade who is returning to England after the end of the war, where he served with distinction at the Siege of Acre. Ivanhoe has also been disinherited by his father Cedric, an Anglo-Saxon noble, for his support for King Richard the Lionhearted's expedition to the Holy Lands and for falling in love with Lady Rowena, whom Cedric had betrothed to a Norman lord. Disguised as a palmer, Ivanhoe leads a group of Norman knights and priests to his father's house seeking hospitality. Through a chain of events, Ivanhoe receives from Isaac the Jew and his daughter Rebecca a suit of armor and a warhorse. With these new acquisitions, he enters a 2-day medieval tournament presided over by Prince John. The first day features a jousting event, and the second day is a melee event. Still in disguise, Ivanhoe wins with the assistance of the Black Knight and is forced to reveal himself. With Ivanhoe's appearance, Prince John and his court realize that King Richard may soon return. The tournament concludes with an archery display by none other than Robin of Locksley. Injured in the melee, Ivanhoe leaves along with his father, Lady Rowena, Isaac, and a few others. Along the way, they are captured, but a few of the party escape. The escapees come across Locksley, and Locksley devises a plan to free Ivanhoe. During the subsequent battle, the Black Knight returns to save Ivanhoe, and the Black Knight is revealed as King Richard himself. King Richard reconciles Ivanhoe and his father's relationship, allowing Ivanhoe and Lady Rowena to marry. This is the story of Ivanhoe and the first introduction in modern terms of Robin of Locksley. To understand the true story of Robin Hood, we must put the story within the historical context of which it was written. So that is just what I'm going to do. In the 5th century CE, barbarian tribes filled the power vacuum across Europe created by the collapse of the Roman Empire. While several groups entered the former Roman territory of Britannia, it were the Angles and the Saxons that would come to dominate the island from the 5th century on. For several hundred years, the Angles and the Saxons created a culture referred to as Anglo-Saxon England. England does mean land of the Angles. Another one of these barbarian tribes were a Scandinavian Viking troop called the Norsemen, or Men from the North. In 911, their leader Rollo made an agreement with the Frankish king Charles the Simple and settled in northern France along the Seine River, establishing the Duchy of Normandy. These Norsemen, or Normans, would protect Paris from further attacks from other barbarian tribes from coming down the Seine. Through generations of marriage and further conquest, the Norman dukes became powerful nobles with ties to both the French and English thrones. Alright, we're going to take a look at the lineage of the Norman dukes once they founded Normandy itself. Rollo married Popa, an aristocratic local girl from Normandy. Their son, William I the Longsword, he married Sprata. It's uncertain of her exact lineage, but it is most likely that she is a Breton captive who married William. Their son, Richard I the Fearless, he married Gunnar. She is most likely a peasant girl from Normandy. Their son, Richard II the Good, married Judith. She was the daughter of the Duke of Brittany, a province right next door to Normandy. Their son, Robert I the Magnificent, had an illegitimate son with Herleva. She's a local peasant girl from Normandy. And their son was William the Conqueror, also known as William the Bastard before he conquered England. He married Matilda of Flanders, the granddaughter of Robert II of France. Alright, now that we got the lineage of the Norman dukes all squared away, we're going to take a look at how it fits into a larger context of what's going on in Europe, specifically England and France. When Rollo established the Duchy of Normandy, Charles the Simple was king of the Franks, and Edward the Elder, son of Alfred the Great, was king of England. When Rollo died in 917, his son, William I, became Duke of Normandy. Robert I overthrew Charles the Simple in a coup in 922, but he died later the next year. When Edward the Elder died in 924, his son Edmund I became King of England. William I died in 942. His son Richard I became Duke of Normandy and ruled for more than 50 years, although he did inherit the title when he was about 10 years old. During his reign, the English crown passed from Edmund I through his son Edgar to his grandson Alfred II. The Frankish crown ended up with Robert I's paternal grandson Hugh Capet, whose father was Hugh the Great, a powerful Frankish duke. In 987, Hugh Capet gave his son Robert II co-regency. Robert I of Normandy had two children important to this story: Richard II, who became Duke of Normandy, and Emma, who married Alfred II, King of England. Alfred and Emma's son was Edward the Confessor, whose death in 1066 set off the chain of events that culminated in the Norman conquest. Two of Richard II's sons became Duke, Richard III and Robert I. Robert I was the father of William II, Duke of Normandy, also known as William the Conqueror. Over the generations of living in northern France and intermarrying with the local population, the Scandinavian culture of Rollo evolved into a much more Francophone version of itself. Their Scandinavian language merged with the local French. The Normans eventually completely rejected their pagan religions, converted to Christianity, and built large cathedrals influenced by their neighbors. The Normans also adopted the social hierarchy of Europe, feudalism. Over time, this became the culture referred to as Norman, a distinct combination of Scandinavian and French. Feudalism was the social order of medieval Europe. At the top was the king. Below him are the nobles. Below the nobles are the knights, and at the very bottom are the peasants. As you go down the pyramid, the upper level provides land to the lower level. The peasants are also given protection from the upper levels. The peasants provide the crops and the services that make it up the ladder. The knights provide protection for the nobles and for the king. The nobles provide money and knights to the king. French medieval historian Jean Froissart said this in 1395 of feudalism. It is the custom in England, as with other countries, for the nobility to have great power over the common people, who are serfs. This means that they are bound by law and custom to plow the field of their master, harvest the corn, gathered into barns, and thresh and winnow the grain. They must also mow and carry home the hay, cut and collect wood, and perform all manner of tasks of this kind. Alright, we're going to take a look at the succession of the English crown and how it ended up in Edward the Confessor's hands. We've previously discussed Edgar the Peaceful, and he passed it to his son Alfred the Unready, who married Emma of Normandy, Richard I's daughter. From there, it actually went over to a Sven Forkbeard, but then a little while later, Alfred regained the crown and passed it to his son Edmund Ironside. From there, it went back over to the Forkbeard line with Knut the Great, and it went to his son Harold Harefoot. From there, it went to Knut the Great's son with Emma of Normandy, Harthonut. And from there, it went to Emma and Alfred's son, Edward the Confessor. Edward the Confessor died in early 1066, but he left no heir. However, the most powerful Anglo-Saxon lord, Harold Godwinson, ascended to the throne. Edward's maternal grandfather was William of Normandy's paternal great-grandfather, therefore William had a claim to the English throne. There was also the matter of Edward's promise to William to make him the successor. In late 1066, William of Normandy invaded England. In the subsequent Battle of Hastings, King Harold was killed and William of Normandy became William the Conqueror. When William was crowned King of England on Christmas Day 1066, he ushered in the Norman era. William brought his culture and his noblemen with him to England. Many of the English barons remained in place, while the very top was replaced by the Normans. This created two cultures in the same area that would mold into one over time. This is easily seen in the modern English language. This is why we have two different words for food, one for when it's out in the field and one when it is on the plate. Take, for example, sheep and deer. The sheep and the deer originate before, and mutton and venison, they come in, the language switches in about 1250. The backdrop of the Robin Hood story, Prince John's rebellion against his brother King Richard the Lionheart, takes place about 130 years after the Norman conquest. Let's get up to speed on their lineage. William the Conqueror married Matilda of Flanders, Robert II's granddaughter. Their son, Henry I, married Matilda of Scotland, the great-granddaughter of Edmund Ironsides. Their daughter was Empress Matilda. She married Holy Roman Emperor Henry V and Geoffrey Plantagenet of Anjou. Her son with Geoffrey was Henry II, who established the Plantagenet dynasty and was the father of both King Richard and King John. Their mother was Eleanor of Aquitaine. Through the generations, the kings of England obtained vast amounts of land in France. While King of England, Richard also ruled Normandy, Aquitaine, Gascony, Poitou, Anjou, Maine, Nantes, and Brittany. While Richard the Lionheart was away fighting in the Third Crusade, his brother Prince John actively accumulated power and started a rebellion with the help of the French king. As previously noted, the Normans have a strong connection to the throne of France, a connection that would ultimately end in the starting of the 100 Years' War a couple centuries later. To fund this rebellion, Prince John raised taxes on the barons and, by extension, the peasant class. Many of these barons were English, but some were Norman, some were both, but all the peasants were English, a mixture of Angles, Saxon, and native ethnic groups. This heavy burden imposed by a tyrannical government caused the turmoil and resentment of Robin Hood. Robin Hood fought back by taking what was stolen from him and his people by their overbearing government. Not too long after the story of Robin Hood concludes, Prince John would ascend to the throne of England. Even then, he was still a tyrant. In 1215, his barons would force him to sign the Magna Carta. It established the responsibilities and restrictions between the king and his barons. King John refused to abide by these terms, and numerous wars broke out between the two factions. The Magna Carta was the start of the governmental relationship evolution that would culminate in the founding of America. This is the time period in which the story of Robin Hood first appears. Robin of Locksley is an Anglo-Saxon nobleman, just as Ivanhoe, caught up in this conflict between the Anglo-Saxons and the Normans, but also between Prince John and his brother King Richard. Both Robin Hood and Ivanhoe followed King Richard in the Third Crusade. Both returned to find their country in chaos. Both had their lands taken from them. Ivanhoe because his father disinherited him, and Robin because of the tyrannical government stole it from him. In the end, both of these wrongs would be set right. During feudalism, lords were bound to their serfs just as the serfs were bound to their lord. Protection was the baron's main responsibility. If a tyrannical force tried to impose their will upon the peasants, it was the responsibility of the lord to protect the peasants from this force. Robin Hood's merry men were the Anglo-Saxon peasants. These men were fighting against a tyrannical Prince John, a Norman, and the governmental hierarchy that is taxing the people into extreme poverty and stealing their lands. Prince John was trying to buy his way to the throne of England. Prince John's sidekick, the Sheriff of Nottingham, was an authoritarian figure enforcing the taxation policy of Prince John. Prince John and the Sheriff of Nottingham were the highest echelons of the government. Robin, an Anglo-Saxon lord, was fighting the tyrannical Normans. Robin Hood is not about taking from the rich and giving it to the poor. Robin Hood was a lord, and not poor, although he did have everything stolen from him. Robin Hood was not fighting back because he was poor. He was fighting a tyrannical government that had stolen his lands from him. It is about taking from an overbearing government and returning the money back to the rightful owner, the people. Robin was fighting for life, liberty, and property. He is really the first American rebel. If you made it this far in the video, I'd like to thank you. This is the first of many videos that I'll bring to you that will provide historical analysis and commentary on current events. If you'd like to, comment below. If you want to support my objective to bring a conservative voice in the liberal bastion of history academics, please do so at the GoFundMe account listed below. Details there. Thank you for your support, and until next time, I am the Green Dragon.